You are running after your desires like a madman, unaware that every step you take is a step toward your own grave. You believe your desires are giving you life, but they are slowly, systematically killing your intelligence and your joy. The Supreme Tao has no desires, yet it revolves the sun and moon in their orbits. Why are you so afraid to drop your beggar's bowl? Die to your desires here now, because tomorrow is nothing but a magnificent lie. Hello, my beloved friends. I see you sitting here, carrying the heavy burdens of your minds, your hearts restless, constantly searching for something in the future, constantly weeping for something lost in the past. You are running after shadows. And because you are running after shadows, you are missing the immense reality that is already available here now. This restlessness, this constant anxiety to become someone else, to possess more, to achieve more, is the ultimate disease of human consciousness. You call it ambition, you call it progress, you call it your life's purpose, but I tell you, it is nothing but a slow suicide. Your desires are killing you. They are poisoning the very springs of your life, leaving you empty, exhausted, and utterly miserable. Before we venture deeper into this uncharted territory of the soul, into this silent space where truth can be felt, let us make a silent agreement. If you find your heart whispering a quiet agreement with these words, if you feel a sudden spark of light breaking through your darkness, feel free to subscribe to this channel. Leave your deepest reflection in the comments below, or share this transmission with another traveler who might be lost in the dark. And if you feel a deep wave of gratitude arising for these silent moments we share together, you are always welcome to support our digital commune by clicking the Super Thanks button or choosing to join our inner circle of members, or even exploring our collection of ebooks. Let it not be a commercial transaction. Let it be a natural flowering of your love, an effortless gesture of sharing the light, helping these words reach all the empty hands across the globe. Let us enter into the profound insights of Koshwan's, the classic of purity. This text is one of the most magnificent doors into the nature of existence. I call it an insight, not a doctrine, not a philosophy, not a religion, because it is not intellectual at all. It is completely existential. The man who is speaking in it is not speaking as a mind. He is not speaking as an ego. He is not trying to convince you with logic. He is just an empty passage for existence itself to say something through him. That is how the great mystics have always lived and spoken. These are not their own words. Because they themselves are no more, they disappeared long before the words came. It is the whole pouring through them. It is the divine singing through their flute. Their expressions may be different, their languages may vary, but the source is always the same. The words of Jesus, Zarathustra, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Krishna, and Muhammad are not ordinary words coming from memory. They are coming from an immediate, living experience. They have touched the divine, and the moment you touch the divine, you evaporate. You cannot exist anymore as a separate entity. You have to die for God to be. This is a profoundly beautiful Taoist insight. Tao is another name for God, but it is far more beautiful than the word God, because the word God has been exploited too much by the priests down the ages. They have exploited humanity in the name of God for so long that even the word has become contaminated. It has become disgusting. Any man of true intelligence is bound to avoid it, because it reminds him of all the nonsense, all the bloodshed, all the crusades and jihads that have happened on this earth in the name of God, in the name of religion. More mischief has happened in the name of God than in any other name. Tao, in that sense, is tremendously beautiful, pure and pristine. You cannot worship Tao, because Tao does not give you the idea of a person. It is simply a principle, an ultimate cosmic principle, not a person. You cannot worship a principle. It would look ridiculous. It would be utterly absurd to pray to Tao. You do not pray to gravitation. You cannot pray to the theory of relativity. Tao simply means the ultimate law, the intrinsic order that binds the whole existence together. Existence is not a chaos, that much is certain. It is a cosmos. There is immense harmony in it, an organic order in it, and the name of that order is Tao. Tao simply means the harmony of the whole. No temples have been built for Tao, no statues, no prayers, no priests, no rituals. And that is the absolute beauty of it. Hence, I do not call it a doctrine, nor do I call it a religion. It is a pure, unadulterated insight. You can call it dharma. That is Buddha's word for Tao. The word in the English language that comes closest to Tao is nature, with a capital N. This profound insight is also one of the smallest treatises ever written in human history. It is so condensed, it is as if millions of roses have been condensed into a single drop of precious perfume. That was the ancient way of expressing truth. Because books were not in existence, printing presses were not there, and people had to remember the insights through heart-to-heart transmission. It is said that this is the first mystic treatise ever written down as a book. It is not much of a book, not more than 1.5 pages, but it existed for thousands of years before it was ever written down. It existed through private and personal communion, through the silent transmission of the lamp from the master to the disciple. That has always been the most significant way to transmit the truth. To write it down makes it more difficult, because then one never knows whose hands it will fall into, who will be reading it. It loses all personal contact, all love, all warmth. In Egypt, in India, in China, in all the ancient civilizations, for thousands of years the mystic message was carried from one person to another, from the master to the disciple, like a secret whisper. And the master would say these things only when the disciple was completely ready, or he would say only as much as the disciple could digest, as much as his stomach could take. Otherwise, words can also produce a spiritual diarrhea. They certainly do produce it, and our 21st century suffers very much from it. All the mystics for centuries resisted writing down their insights for this very reason. This was the first treatise ever written, and that is its ultimate significance. It marks a certain radical change in human consciousness, a change which was going to prove of great importance later on, because even though it is beautiful to commune directly, person to person, the message cannot reach many people that way. Many are bound to miss it. Yes, it will not fall into the wrong hands, but many right hands will also remain empty, and one should think more of the right hands than of the wrong hands. The wrong people are going to be wrong whether some profound insight falls into their hands or not, but the right people will be missing something which could transform their very being. Koswan, who wrote this small treatise, marks a milestone in the consciousness of humanity. He understood the significance of the written word, knowing all its hidden dangers. In the preface, he writes, "Before writing down these words, I contemplated 10,000 times whether to write or not, because I was taking a dangerous step. Nobody had gathered that much courage before him. Up to that moment in history, no master had ever dared to write anything down, just to avoid the wrong people, just to keep the truth from becoming a plaything for scholars and pundits. Even a man like Buddha contemplated for 7 days before uttering a single word after his enlightenment. When he attained to the ultimate awakening, for 7 days he remained utterly silent, wavering, hesitating whether to say anything or not. The question in his mind was, those who cannot understand, what is the point of saying to them such profound insights? They will misunderstand, they will misinterpret, they will do immense harm to the message. Rather than allowing the message to heal them, they will wound the message itself. They will manipulate the message according to their own small minds, their prejudices, their conditionings. Is it right to allow the pristine message to be polluted by foolish people, by mediocre people, by stupid people? Buddha was hesitant, very hesitant. Yes, He also thought of the few people who would be able to understand it. But then he could see that those people who were capable of understanding his words would be able to find the truth on their own anyway, because they could not be ordinary people. They would be super intelligent people. If they could understand his words, they would be able to find their own way. They would be able to reach the truth on their own. So why bother about them? Maybe it would take a little longer for them, but so what? Existence is eternal. Time is not short. But the message, once it gets into the wrong hands, will be corrupted forever. Even to utter a single word, he was hesitant. I can understand Ko Swan's contemplating over the matter 10,000 times whether to write it down or not, because when you say something to people, if they are stupid people, they are bound to forget it very soon. If they are mediocre people, they will not bother even to listen. They won't care. But once it is written down, then they will read it, they will study it, then it will become part of their schools, their colleges, and their universities, and stupid scholars will ponder over it, and they will write great scholarly treatises on it. People who know absolutely nothing about the inner reality will be talking about it for centuries. And the truth will be lost in all that loud noise that scholars make. They will argue for and against, split hairs, and debate endlessly. It is said that once a disciple of the devil came running to him, panting, terrified, and he said, "What are you doing sitting here under this tree so peacefully? Have you not heard the news? One man on the earth has found the truth. We have to do something immediately and urgently, because if this man has found the truth, our very existence is in danger. Our whole profession is at stake. He can cut our very roots." The old devil laughed, a deep, knowing laugh. He said, "Calm down, please. You are new to this business. That's why you are so disturbed by it. Don't be worried at all. I have got my people there. They have already started working." The disciple asked, "But I have not seen any of our people around him. The crowd is full of seekers." The old devil smiled and said, "I work in many mysterious ways. The scholars are there, the pundits are there, the philosophers are there, the theologians are there. Don't be worried at all. They will surround him. They will make so much noise for and against his words. They will create so much argumentation and confusion that the still, small voice of truth will be completely silenced by them. We need not worry. These scholars, these pundits, and these professors are my people. I work through them. They are in my service. They are my secret agents. Don't be worried. You may not have seen my well-known disciples there because I cannot go directly. I always have to go in disguise. And I have already arrived there, and my secret agents have started working. They have surrounded the person. He cannot do any harm to our kingdom of darkness, and soon he will be dead. He is old, and then my people will become his apostles, his priests, and they will manage the whole affair. They will build a church around him, and the truth will be safely buried. Priests are always in the service of the devil, never in the service of God. The so-called great scholars who go on and on with logic-chopping, hair-splitting arguments are in the service of the devil, not in the service of the divine. Once you write down something, you are giving an open invitation, a golden chance to these people. They will jump upon the opportunity. They won't miss it for a single moment. They will mess the whole thing up. They will create great confusion around it. They will write commentaries upon commentaries, and the original flavor will be lost. That is their expertise. Hence, I can understand Ko Xuan contemplating 10,000 times whether to write it or not. But finally, he decided to write, and I think he did the right thing. One should never be afraid of darkness. Light, howsoever small it is far more powerful than darkness, howsoever big, howsoever old it may be. In fact, darkness has no power of its own. Light has power. Darkness is only a negative absence. It is not a positive presence. These words of Ko Xuan are powerful words. And the way mystics speak the truth, it is almost beyond the grasp of the scholars. They really cannot destroy its beauty. In fact, they cannot even touch its truth. It is impossible for them, for the simple reason that the mystics always speak in a paradoxical language. They do not speak logically. Hence, they are forever beyond the grasp of the analytical scholars. The scholars can only see contradictions in them, because the scholar functions through the narrow door of logic, and all mystic expressions are paradoxical, illogical, or supralogical. And particularly Taoist sayings are superb in that way. Nobody has ever been able to transcend their paradoxes. Even in this small treatise, you will come across paradoxes almost in every sentence, in every utterance. That too has to be understood deeply. Why do mystics speak in paradoxes? It is a built-in safeguard to remain unavailable to the scholars, to remain untouchable to the logical mind. The paradox can be understood only by a meditator. It can never be understood by a person who lives exclusively in the head, in the mind. Unless you have tasted something of the no-mind, unless you have entered the silence of your own inner being, you cannot understand a paradox. That is an inbuilt safeguard. Speak paradoxically. Speak as if you are almost mad, and the scholars will flee from you. Once a journalist came to see George Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was drinking his morning tea. He always avoided journalists because they are some of the most superficial people around, and his way of avoiding them was utterly unique. He asked the woman disciple who was pouring tea for him, as the journalist sat by his side trying to look important, "What day is it today?" And the woman said, "Today is Saturday." And suddenly Gurdjieff became so angry. He went into a wild rage and threw his teacup on the floor. The cup was shattered into thousands of pieces. The journalist became very much afraid, trembling in his seat, because it actually was Saturday. And Gurdjieff shouted, "You always go on talking nonsense to me. Just the other day you were telling me that it was Friday, and now today you say it is Saturday. How can it be? How can Saturday come after Friday?" The journalist thought this man was completely mad, a dangerous lunatic. He simply stood up and escaped from the room without even saying goodbye, and the moment he left, Gurdjieff had a good laugh. The woman disciple was very much shocked. She was new to the place. She did not know his ways. She said, "But why did you become so angry? It really is Saturday." Gurdjieff laughed and said, "You will understand if you remain here a little longer. Now this journalist will never come back to bother me. For his whole life I have put him off. And he will go and spread rumors about me to all his professional colleagues. So not only has he been thrown out, but many more who may have bothered me with stupid questions will never dare to come here." He was thought to be a madman, utterly mad. The paradoxical statements of the mystics always have a deep purpose. The first purpose is that the scholars avoid them. The moment a scholar comes across a paradox, deep down he knows this man is mad. He won't bother about such a man. Secondly, the paradox is the only way to indicate something that is really true about life. Logic is always partial. Logic is always half. It never takes in the whole. It cannot take in the whole, because the whole consists of opposites. Life consists of polarities. Just as electricity consists of positive and negative poles, the whole of life consists of polarities. And polarities are only apparently opposite to each other. Deep down, they are not opposite. Deep down, for those who understand, for those who have the intelligence to see deeply, they are not opposites, they are complementaries. They support each other, they generate energy through their friction. But for that, you will need a deep experience of meditation. The mind alone won't help you. The mind will say, "These are contradictory statements. This man is saying one thing at the beginning of the sentence, and by the time he ends the sentence, he has uttered just the opposite." But the mystic knows exactly what he is doing. He is trying to put the whole truth into it, and the whole truth can only be expressed through the polarity. The whole truth can be understood only by a person who has tasted something of the whole. The mind always splits things. It divides, it separates, it functions exactly like a prism. When a white sun ray passes through a prism, it becomes divided into 7 distinct colors. That's how a rainbow is created in the sky. It is created by very small drops of water hanging in the air after the rain. Those drops of water function like tiny prisms, and the sun rays passing through them become divided into 7 colors. The mind is a prism. It divides everything into many. The truth is one, absolutely one, but if you look through the mind, everything appears to be many. Everything appears to be split into conflict. And the mystic's way of saying things is such that he wants to put all the colors of the rainbow again back together, to fuse them into one pure white light, exactly as they were in the very beginning before passing through the prism of the mind. Because of this paradoxical way of expression, scholars avoid them. People who live in the mind cannot comprehend them. It is an ultimate safeguard. That's how such beautiful treatises have survived for centuries without being corrupted by the universities. Ko Xuan is simply writing it. Remember it. He is not the creator of this treatise. He has also experienced the same truth, because the truth is always the same whoever experiences it. Whenever one experiences it, in any age, in any century, it is always the same. It does not change. Time makes no difference to the ultimate truth. But what he is saying has been transferred by word of mouth for centuries, maybe for thousands of years before him. That's why we don't exactly know whose words they are originally. He simply begins by saying, "The Venerable Master said, 'Who is this Master?' Nothing is said about him, no name is given, no biography is attached. Perhaps the Master simply represents all the masters of the past, all the masters of the present, and all the masters of the future. Maybe it simply represents the essential wisdom of existence, not any particular person, but simply the ultimate principle speaking. Nothing is known about Ko Xuan either, nothing at all. Hence, for at least a few centuries, it had been thought by many scholars that these words belong to Lao Tzu. But Lao Tzu has a different way of speaking, a totally different flavor. These words cannot be coming from Lao Tzu directly. We have gone into the words of Lao Tzu. He is even more mad than Ko Xuan. He is even more mystical, even more uncompromised. And it is a well-known fact that Lao Tzu never wrote anything in his life other than the Tao Te Ching. And that too, He wrote under immense pressure. At the last moment of his life, when he was leaving China to die in the solitudes of the Himalayas, Lao Tzu had decided to die in the mountains, and one cannot find a more beautiful, more silent place to die than the Himalayas. The virgin silence of the snow, the beauty, nature in its most profound, unpolluted splendor. So when he became very old, he said to his disciples, "I am going to the Himalayas to find a place where I can simply disappear into nature, where nobody will know about me, where no monument will be made in honor of me, no temple, not even a grave. I simply want to evaporate as if I had never existed on this earth." But when he was passing through the border of the country, he was stopped at the gate because the king had alerted all the border guards and ordered that if Lao Tzu tries to pass out of the country through any gate, he should be prevented, he should be arrested, unless he writes down whatsoever he has experienced in his inner world. His whole life he had avoided writing. He would say, "The Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. The moment you speak it, you falsify it." In the end, it is said, because he was caught on the border and the guards would not allow him to go to his beloved Himalayas, he stayed in a guard's hut for 3 days and just wrote down that small, immortal treatise, the Tao Te Ching. So, this classic of purity cannot belong to Lao Tzu directly. But because nothing much is known about Koshuan, people used to think that they must be the words of Lao Tzu, and Koshuan must be a disciple of Lao Tzu who had simply written down the notes of his master. That is not so. Koshuan himself is a master in his own right. In his preface to this small treatise, he says a few things which have to be remembered by every seeker. First, he says, "When I attained to union with Tao, I meditated upon this insight 10,000 times before writing it down." He says, "When I attained to union with Tao, he is not just a student, he is not just a disciple copying down notes. He is an enlightened man. He has attained to the ultimate union with the cosmos. He is not writing notes heard from somebody else. He has experienced it in his own blood, in his own bones, in his own marrow. He has become one with nature." He says in the preface, "It is only for the seekers of the beyond. The worldly cannot understand it." He makes it absolutely clear from the very beginning that if you are a worldly man, it is better not to bother about these words. Don't waste your time. It is not meant for you. It will not be of any use to you in your marketplace. It may even confuse you. It may even distract you from your worldly affairs, your ambitions, your greed. It is better not to get involved with things in which you are not really interested. It is better not to be accidental. There are many people who are accidental seekers, just by the way, just out of curiosity. They will meet someone, they will read a book, and they will become momentarily interested. They are like driftwood on the ocean, moving with any wave, having no deep, authentic longing for truth, just wandering aimlessly. Ko Suan says, it is only for the seekers of the beyond. He makes it clear that if you are a seeker of the beyond, you must be ready to risk everything for it, because the search for the beyond is a dangerous adventure. It is the greatest adventure possible to human consciousness, tremendously ecstatic, but not easy at all. It is highly arduous. It has its own cross. Of course, resurrection comes through it, but resurrection cannot happen unless you are first crucified. So he makes it clear that it is only for the true seekers. One has to be very certain about oneself, whether one is a true seeker or not. Are you really interested in truth? Or are you just comforting yourself with religious cliches? Every child is distracted from the very beginning. No child is born interested in the priest's God, but parents go on forcing the idea of God on every child. If by chance you happen to be born in a family of atheists, then they impose the idea of atheism on you. If you are born in a communist country, then of course, communism will be imposed upon your soft mind. If not the Bible, then Das Kapital. If not the Holy Trinity, then the unholy trinity of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. But something is bound to be forced into your head from the outside. No parent is loving enough to leave you alone, to yourself, to grow, to help you, to nourish your intelligence, and to give you total, unconditional freedom to be yourself, authentically yourself. Hence, there are many people who think they are seekers of God, but they are not. Their whole seeking is an imposed phenomenon, a social conditioning, a fear-based habit. And if you are only searching for God because you have been told to do so, because you have been continuously brainwashed by the society, then the word has become a reality in you, but the experience is not there. It is not part of you. It is not intrinsic. It has come from the outside. You are just like a parrot, repeating words you do not understand. The first thing to be completely decisive about is whether there is a deep, burning longing in your heart to know the truth. Are you ready to risk your comfort, your respectability, your prestige, even your life, if the need arises, just to know who you are? If it is so, then Ko Xuan says, these words are for you. If you are only a worldly person, and by worldly, he means one who is exclusively interested in money, power, and prestige, then it would be better if you do not bother about such great things. They are not for you, at least not yet. You have to become completely fed up with all your so-called worldly desires first. You must go into those desires and see their futility. Unless you become tremendously frustrated with the world, unless you see that all worldly achievements are empty, that whether you succeed or fail, you always fail, that whether you have millions in the bank or you are poor, you are always empty inside, that whether you are a beggar on the street or an emperor in a palace, you remain a beggar in your soul. When that insight dawns on you through your own frustration, then only can you really become a seeker of the beyond. Otherwise, if you pretend to be a seeker of the beyond, while your worldly desires are still alive, you will bring your whole world with you into the temple. You will bring all your greed, all your ambitions into your religion. That's why people think of heaven, of paradise. It is not that they are interested in God. It is not that they are interested in meditation. They are only interested in extending their worldly pleasures into eternity. They are afraid of death, and out of fear and greed, they start praying. But a prayer that arises out of fear and greed is a sin. It is not a prayer at all. A real prayer arises only out of immense gratitude, never out of fear, never out of greed. A real prayer arises out of pure love for truth, whatsoever it may be. Otherwise, your worldly desires will simply be projected onto your concept of heaven. If you look into the descriptions of paradise in different religions and different countries, you will be surprised. It is nothing but a reflection of what those people lacked on the earth. The Tibetan paradise is described as very warm, obviously, because Tibetans suffer from the biting cold so much that they want heaven to be full of sun and warmth so that they can relax. The Indian paradise, on the other hand, is description of an air-conditioned space, full of cool breezes, big green trees, and cold rivers, because India has suffered so much from the scorching heat. The Tibetan hell is absolutely icy, and the Indian hell is full of roaring fire. These are not objective realities. These are human projections. Whatsoever we desire, we project onto heaven, and whatsoever we are afraid of, we project onto hell. In the Mohammedan heaven, there are streams of wine flowing. This is very strange. Here on earth, the priest condemns wine, calls it a sin, and there in heaven, he rewards his saints with rivers of wine. All the paradises of the world are full of beautiful, unaging women, because these scriptures were written by men, so they projected their sexual fantasies into eternity. They say These women remain stuck at the age of 18 forever. They never grow old. It is very stagnant, very boring. They must be getting tired of remaining 18 for millions of years. But this is man's greedy mind. Here on earth, the saint renounces women, praises celibacy, suppresses his sexuality, and deep down in his unconscious, he is hoping that he will be paid well in heaven, that he will be rewarded with celestial virgins. These are your worldly desires coming back through the back door of the unconscious. You cannot simply push them away through suppression. Unless you have encountered them, unless you have watched them with absolute awareness, you cannot dissolve them. Ko Shuan is right. He says, the worldly cannot understand it. They are bound to misunderstand. He says in his preface, I received it from the divine ruler of the Golden Gate. Truth is always a gift. Remember it. Truth is never an achievement, because all achievements belong to the ego, and truth can never be a part of your ego trip. Truth happens only when the ego is completely dropped, so you can never say, I have achieved it. You can only say, it has been given to me. It is a gift of existence, a benediction. Ko Shuan is right. He says, I received it. Hence, remember, to know the truth, you have to be at the receiving end. You cannot be aggressive about truth. The real seeker is not an achiever. He is not masculine. He is not aggressive. He becomes completely feminine. He becomes like a womb, passive, receptive, open. He empties himself totally so that space is created within his being to receive the divine guest. And that is the whole art of meditation. That is what we are doing here. And that is what for centuries mystics have been telling their disciples to do. Empty yourself totally. Become an absolute nothingness, a zero. And the moment you are totally nothing, at that very moment, truth descends into you. You become full of it. First you have to be empty of yourself, and then you become full of the divine, full of Tao, full of Dharma. He says, I received it from the divine ruler of the Golden Gate. This is a beautiful, mysterious expression, the Golden Gate. That is the Taoist way of saying that God is not a person sitting on a throne, but a gate, an opening into ultimate existence. And if you are empty, that door opens within your own being. It is your ego that is blocking the door. It is you who are standing in the way. Except you, there is no other hindrance between you and the divine. Remove yourself. Step out of the way. Don't come in between. And suddenly, the Golden Gate opens. And it is called golden because the moment you pass through it, all your dross is burned away. You are transformed into pure gold. The dust disappears. It is transmuted. your baseline existence becomes divine. This is the true meaning of alchemy, transforming the base metal of the ego into the gold of consciousness. And it happens simply by becoming a receiver, by becoming utterly a non-entity. Koswan says, "It has been previously only transmitted by word of mouth. Those who will be able to comprehend the meaning will become ambassadors of the divine and enter the golden gate. Those who can understand these words will become ambassadors of the divine, naturally, effortlessly, without any practice. They will start radiating light, they will become luminous, their very presence will become a healing force. Miracles will start happening through them, but they will not be the doers of those miracles. Existence will work through them. It is said that many miracles happened in Koswan's life, just as they are said about Jesus, about Buddha, about Muhammad. For example, it is said he was able to walk on water, but don't take these stories literally. Jesus was not so foolish, nor was Koswan so foolish as to walk on water. There is no need to walk on water when boats are available. Then what does it mean? It is a poetic expression, a magnificent metaphor. It simply means they were able to do the impossible in human consciousness. And what is the most impossible thing in this world? The most impossible thing is to transcend the world while living in it. The most impossible thing is to remain untouched by the mire of desires. The most impossible thing is to become utterly empty of the ego. These are just poetic ways of saying that they lived on this earth, yet they did not belong to this earth. They were in the world, but the world was not in them. Don't be misguided by religious fanatics who go on emphasizing that these metaphors are historical facts. Be a little more poetic, be a little more intelligent if you really want to understand the mystic way of life. The language of miracles is the only possible way to express something that is completely indescribable, to hint at something that is beyond the reach of human language. But fools cling to the outer shell of the miracle and miss the inner kernel of truth. My effort here is to make you intelligent, conscious, and aware, not to make you superstitious believers in miracles. There is only one true miracle, and that is your being utterly empty, the death of your ego. If that happens, you have passed through the golden gate. You have known what eternity is. You have gone beyond the tyranny of time. Now let us look at the opening sutra. The Venerable Master said, "The Supreme Tao is formless." From the very beginning, Koswan wants you to know that Tao has no form, no face, no visible structure. So you cannot make a statue of Tao. You cannot create a church or a temple around Tao. You cannot organize rituals. No priesthood is possible. It is the universal law of existence itself. You cannot worship it. You cannot pray to it. All your prayers are unheard and will remain unheard because there is no person sitting there to listen to you. There is no old man in the sky to fulfill your desires. Your prayers are nothing but your worldly desires dressed up in religious jargon. Watch your prayers. What are you asking for? You are asking for money, for health, for success, for protection. The garb is religious, but the mind behind it is completely worldly. Tao is not the path of prayer. It is the path of meditation. Tao is formless, yet it produces and nurtures heaven and earth. It does not mean that Tao is indifferent to you. It simply means it is a natural law, like gravitation, like seasons. It goes on nourishing you. You are born out of it. You breathe through it. You dissolve back into it. It is the very heartbeat of the cosmos, but it has no ego of its own. The Supreme Tao has no desires. So, if you want to have a living communion with Tao, you will have to drop all your desires. You cannot enter the palace of desirelessness carrying a load of expectations. People simply go on changing their desires, but they basically remain the same. A man drops his desire for money and starts desiring heaven. It is the same greed. A man stops smoking and starts chewing gum. It is the same mechanical habit. Because you remain the same inside, changing the outer structures of your life will not help. You can change your clothes. You can change your name. You can move from the west to the east. But if your mind remains full of desires, you will create the same misery wherever you go. Unless intelligence arises in you, unless your unconsciousness is transformed into pure consciousness, your life will remain a round of frustration. The Supreme Tao has no desires. Yet by its power the sun and moon revolve in their orbits. The Supreme Tao is nameless, yet it ever supports all things. I do not know its name, but for title call it Tao. See the beautiful, non-fanatic attitude of Koshuan. He says, I do not know its name. That is how a true knower speaks. The people who claim that they know the name of God, who claim that their book has the absolute truth, are utterly ignorant. The real knower functions out of a deep state of not knowing, out of an innocent wonder. He says, I do not know its name, but just because we have to call it something, for title call it Tao. It is an arbitrary title, like an algebraic XYZ. If you prefer another name, if you want to call it Dharma, if you want to call it truth, if you want to call it nature, there is no problem at all. Taoism is not a dogma. It is an open sky. That is why When Buddhism reached China from India, there was no conflict, no argumentation, no religious wars. The Taoist mystics simply looked into the eyes of the Buddhist monks and agreed with them. They laughed and they hugged each other and said, "Perfectly right. We call it Tao, you call it Dharma. It is the same nameless, formless reality. We are only speaking different languages, but we are indicating towards the exact same truth." This is one of the most beautiful events that has ever happened in the history of human consciousness. There was no conversion, no violence. They simply merged into each other like two clouds, and out of that beautiful meeting, Zen was born. Zen is the rare, magnificent flowering of the meeting of Buddha and Lao Tzu, the synthesis of Indian insight and Taoist spontaneity. This is how a truly religious person is. He is never a fanatic. He cannot be. He understands that all names are arbitrary. All doctrines are provisional. All words are just fingers pointing to the moon. My sannyasins have to learn this beautiful, open approach towards life. You should not belong to any dogma. You should not belong to any church. You should not be a Christian, a Hindu, a Mohammedan, or a Jew. All these labels are childish, political, and competitive. A truly religious person is absolutely free from all dogma, because only in the fertile soil of freedom can understanding grow. Once you are rooted in this freedom, you will start growing naturally, and a great foliage, a great flowering of consciousness will happen to you. Let us move to the second question that arises. Could you say something about discipline and repression? They are as distinct as the earth and the sky. The distance between the two is so vast that it is completely unbridgeable. Repression is the exact opposite of discipline, but for thousands of years, because of the stupid priests and politicians, repression has been misunderstood and thought of as if it were discipline. It gives a pseudo appearance of it, and the real is always in danger from the pseudo, because the pseudo wears the mask of the real. Repression is cheap. Any stupid person can do it. It needs no intelligence at all to repress yourself, to torture your body, to deny your desires. But discipline needs great intelligence, great awareness. Discipline comes from your innermost core. It is an inner flowering, not an imposition from the outside. Nobody else can discipline you. The very word discipline is beautiful. It comes from the same root as disciple, which means the art of learning, one who is ready to learn, one who is capable of being open. Learning is an inner process. One has to be always alert, always awake. Only then can one learn. You have to watch all that goes on happening around you. And you have to deepen this watchfulness so that you can see even the most subtle inner processes of your body, your mind, and your heart. You have to become a pure mirror. You have to witness everything within yourself without any judgment, and that very witnessing brings true discipline. Then a deep, effortless harmony arises in your life, because whatsoever is wrong starts falling away from you of its own accord. You do not have to drop it through willpower. You do not have to fight with it. If you have to drop something through effort and struggle, then it is repression. If it falls naturally, like dry leaves falling from a tree in autumn, then it is true discipline. Discipline must be effortless. It must arise out of sheer understanding, out of meditation. Repression has nothing to do with understanding or learning. It is based on fear and obedience. Others tell you what to do and what not to do. Others give you the 10 Commandments, and you simply follow like a slave because you are afraid of hell and greedy for heaven. And who are these others who dominate you? They are the powerful people, politically powerful, religiously powerful, the people who own the state or the church, the people who have vested interests. To safeguard their vested interests, they create a mental slavery in humanity. They want people to be obedient. They want people to be compliant. They do not want people to be rebellious. Hence, they cannot allow intelligence to grow. Intelligence is basically rebellious. It is radical. It is revolutionary. To be intelligent is the most dangerous thing for those who are in power. Hence, every child has to be crippled. Every child has to be mentally paralyzed from the very beginning. No child can be allowed to live his life according to his own inner light. Every child is born highly intelligent. But 25 years of conditioning, from the primary school to the university, creates a stupid, mechanical person out of an intelligent child. He becomes so afraid to say no to the crowd. He becomes so frightened of being an outsider that he simply follows like a sheep. He is no more a man. He is just a cog in the collective machine. The only way the society can achieve this is to teach the child how to repress himself. First, he has to repress his intelligence. Then he has to repress his sexuality. Then he has to repress his anger, his joy, his spontaneity, all that can be a danger to the status quo. For example, every society talks beautifully about peace, but lives exclusively for war. Hence, sex has to be deeply repressed in young people, because a sexually repressed person can be changed into a violent soldier very easily. The sexually repressed person is always angry, always frustrated, always on the verge of violence. His repressed sexual energy turns into hatred, into destructiveness. He loses all tenderness, all loving qualities. Up to now, All human societies have been warring societies, always preparing for the next war. Hence, they cannot allow sexual freedom. If a society is sexually free, and a person is allowed to live his love life totally and joyously, his violence will disappear. He will not be ready to do such utterly stupid things as killing other people across the border for no reason at all. If a politician tells him to go to war, an intelligent, loving person will look at him and say, "Why? Why should I kill people who have done no harm to me? Just because you want to dominate the world? Go and fight yourself. I am happy with my beloved. I am happy with my life." A loving person cannot be turned into a robot. War will become impossible on this earth only when sex is freed from the poison of repression. All psychological research shows this conclusively. Weapons are nothing but phallic symbols of a repressed, frustrated mind. To make you a part of the crowd, your individuality has to be effaced completely. You have to be forced to be a Christian, a Hindu, a Mohammedan, or a communist, because the moment you become part of a crowd, you lose your unique intelligence. You start functioning according to the collective mind, and the collective mind is always the lowest mind, the most mediocre mind. The crowd functions through the lowest common denominator, and once you repress any energy within yourself, that energy does not disappear. It starts turning sour. It starts rotting inside your house. The same energy that would have become a beautiful flower of love becomes a sharp thorn of hatred. The same energy that would have kept you flowing like a dynamic river becomes stagnant, starts stinking. Life needs to remain in a flowing state. Repression makes your life a stagnant pool. That is why the average mental age of humanity is not more than 12 years. Psychologically, people stop growing at 12 because at 13, the dangerous age of sexuality arrives. Before the child becomes sexually mature, his growth must be stopped by the society. All kinds of conditionings, fears, and moralities must be packed into his mind before he turns 12, so that he can be controlled for the rest of his life. After that, he only grows old. He never grows up. I am completely against all forms of repression. I am all for natural expression. Express yourself creatively. Existence is God's expression. That is what this whole beautiful cosmos is all about. Express yourself and never condemn anything that nature has given to you. Nothing is wrong with you. All that is beautiful. All that is has a purpose. It may need transformation. It may need to be guided into higher channels, but it must never be suppressed. And transformation happens only through true discipline. and true discipline comes only through meditation. Become more aware, become more watchful. Observe your thoughts, observe your desires, but observe them without any prior conclusions. If you are already convinced that sex is a sin or that anger is bad, you cannot watch your mind honestly. The moment an angry thought arises, you will shrink back in guilt. You will try to push it down into the basement of your unconscious. You will start fighting with it. A meditator does not fight. He simply observes, like a scientific spectator. He takes note of whatsoever passes on the screen of his mind. He lets it come, he lets it be, and he lets it go, remaining completely detached. And the ultimate beauty of watchfulness is this: whatsoever is meaningless starts disappearing of its own accord through pure awareness, and whatsoever is meaningful starts growing, starts deepening. Your energies naturally desert the meaningless and gather around the true. Then, a natural discipline is born in your life, a discipline that carries no ego, a discipline that makes you simple, humble, and ordinary. And that ordinariness is divine, that simplicity is sacred. My purpose here is not to give you a set of rules, not to give you a new cage of morality. My purpose is to help you live in absolute freedom, to take the total responsibility of your life upon your own shoulders, so that you can drop all father figures, all dependency, and discover your own authentic individuality. That is the greatest blessing, the greatest benediction possible to a human being. You must understand that the life you are currently living is not truly your own. It has been handed down to you by centuries of dead ghosts. Your parents, your teachers, your politicians, and your priests have all contributed to your internal prison. They have given you a complicated conscience, but they have completely destroyed your natural consciousness. Conscience is an artificial creation, a social manipulation, a mechanical device that tells you what is right and what is wrong according to the convenience of the collective mob. But consciousness is completely different. Consciousness does not care about rules or conventions. It is alive, spontaneous, and fluid. When you function merely from conscience, you are living like a robot. You press a button, and a specific reaction happens. When someone insults you, you immediately become angry. It is completely automatic. When someone praises you, your ego expands like a balloon. It is completely automatic. You do not have any real say in it. You are simply a machine reacting to external stimuli. True transformation begins only when you step out of this mechanical trap and become a detached witness to your own reactions, watching the gears of the mind turn without being pulled into them. Look at your relationships. You think you love someone, but the moment you enter into what you call a relationship, a subtle game of dominance, mastery, and ownership begins. You want to possess the other person because you are terrified of losing them tomorrow. You want to lock them in a birdcage of marriage, of law, of social respectability, so that your tomorrow is safe and secure. But love cannot be legalized. Love cannot be bound by social codes. Love is like a wild bird. If you lock it in a cage, it is no longer the same bird. It loses its song. It loses its beautiful wings. It loses its life. What remains in the cage is a dead corpse, an imitation of the wild bird. Marriage is a plastic flower. It never withers. It never changes. It looks completely permanent, but it has no fragrance. It has no life. Real love is like a real rose. It opens in the morning, it breathes in the sun, it fills the air with its exquisite perfume, and by the evening its petals fall and return to the earth. It is changing, it is insecure, it is fragile, and because it is fragile, it is beautiful. Only fools ask for permanence in a world that is constantly changing. If you ask for permanence, you are bound to purchase plastic roses. You are bound to live a false life. And this trap of permanence is not only in your relationships, it is the core of your mind. Your mind is constantly collecting information, data, definitions, and theories. You read scriptures, you study philosophies, you become highly knowledgeable, a great scholar, a pundit. But I tell you, knowledge is a false substitute for wisdom. Knowledge means you know about the truth, but you do not know the truth itself. It is like a blind man who has read all the books on light, who can give a beautiful lecture on the physics of light, but who has never experienced a single ray of sun. His knowledge is borrowed, it is an imitation, it is a heavy burden on his head. Wisdom is completely different. Wisdom comes only when you drop all your knowledge, when you step out of your mind and enter a state of complete not knowing. To be in a state of not knowing is the most pristine innocence. It is like becoming a child again, full of wonder, full of awe, open to all the mysteries of existence. When you do not know anything, your eyes are clear, unclouded by concepts. You simply look at a tree and you see the tree as it is, in all its green splendor, without the word tree coming in between you and the reality. This brings us to the deepest fear inside your heart, the fear of being alone. You confuse aloneness with loneliness. Loneliness is a negative state, a state of feeling empty, rejected, isolated from the world. It is a state of misery. And to escape from this misery, you run after people, you seek company, you look for a lover, you turn on the radio or the television, you scroll through your social media mindlessly. Why are you so desperately running? Because you cannot face yourself. The moment you are left alone in a dark room, a terrible anxiety arises. All your repressions, all your hidden wounds, all your unfulfilled desires start coming up to the surface. You cannot tolerate your own company because you have built your whole identity on what others think of you. You are a collection of masks. When you are alone, the audience is gone, and when the audience is gone, your masks begin to slip. You do not know who you are without your masks. This empty space feels like death, but I tell you, if you have the courage to sit silently in this emptiness, if you do not run away into distractions, a miracle happens. The loneliness transforms into aloneness. Aloneness is a positive state, a state of absolute self-contentment. It means you are so full of your own presence, so blissful in your own being, that you do not need anyone else to complete you. George Gurdjieff used to work with crystallization, focusing heavily on willpower, making extreme efforts to integrate the mind. But my work is completely different. My work is not of crystallization, but of total dissolution. I want you to dissolve, to melt, to become a non-entity. Gurdjieff's path was the path of the warrior, depending on friction, tension, and immense inner struggle. It is a valid door, but it is extremely difficult, serious, and heavy. My path is the path of playfulness, of absolute let go, of surrender. You do not need to fight your mind. You simply need to relax into your being. When you are relaxed, the mind loses its grip automatically. Crystallization can easily strengthen the subtle ego, making you feel like a spiritual giant who has achieved great things through personal willpower. Dissolution kills the ego at the very root. You become like water, flowing downwards, taking the shape of the vessel, completely loose and natural. Look at modern art, look at modern poetry and music. They have become so ugly, so chaotic, and so full of noise. If you look at Picasso's paintings, you will see a deep note of insanity, a reflection of a chaotic, fragmented mind. Picasso was undoubtedly a genius, but his genius lacked a meditative center, a spiritual grounding. Because he had no inner silence, his art became an expression of his internal turmoil, a catharsis of madness. Michelangelo, on the other hand, created art out of a deeply centered, balanced consciousness. His sculptures carry a deep stillness, a serene beauty that can pull you into meditation just by looking at them. When a society loses its spiritual roots, its creativity becomes rough, purely sexual, and deeply destructive. Energy must pass through the alchemy of meditation to be refined into higher forms of art and beauty. Without that refinement, you only project your inner garbage onto the canvas, infecting anyone who looks at it. The world is full of comical games, especially the games between husbands and wives. The husband pretends to be the master of the house, shouting and making grand decisions, while the wife holds the real strings from behind the scenes, allowing him to enjoy his illusion of mastery. It is a continuous make-believe. You live in these hypocrisies because you are terrified of being authentic. You are afraid that if you show your real face, you will be rejected by the crowd. So you continue to act, playing the role of the good husband, the obedient wife, the responsible citizen, while your true soul suffocates underneath the weight of these characters. You become an actor in your own life, missing the entire joy of existence just to maintain a respectable facade. You must realize that true meditation is not something you do for 20 minutes in the morning and then forget about for the rest of the day. Meditation is a way of being, a continuous state of watchfulness that must accompany you wherever you go, whatever you do. If you are walking down the street, walk meditatively. If you are eating your food, eat meditatively. If you are talking to a friend, remain a witness to your words and to your inner silence. This is the whole secret of Zen. It does not divide life into the sacred and the mundane. For a Zen master, chopping wood is as sacred as sitting in the temple. Cooking a meal is as full of divinity as reciting a sutra. It does not matter what the act is. What matters is the quality of consciousness you bring to that act. Look at the ancient story of the butcher who was appointed to the emperor's kitchen. His knife remained perfectly sharp and new for 40 years because he worked with absolute awareness, with total presence. He did not cut the meat with anger or mechanical habit. He was a silent witness, a pure vehicle for the natural flow of existence. He turned his ordinary profession into a magnificent meditation. The same is true for every aspect of your life. You are constantly trying to control your thoughts. You are constantly trying to force your mind into a state of peace. But the very effort to force peace creates a deep friction inside your being. You cannot force stillness, because the enforcer is the ego itself. The ego loves to control. The ego loves to dominate, even when it comes to spiritual practices. If you sit down and say to yourself, "I must stop thinking," you are creating a war inside your head. One part of your mind is trying to suppress another part of your mind, And this struggle only generates more noise, more tension, more anxiety. True meditation is not a struggle. It is an absolute let go, a surrender to the present moment. You simply sit silently and let your thoughts pass like clouds in the sky. Do not fight with them. Do not judge them. Do not call them good or bad. If an angry thought comes, let it come, let it be, and let it go. You are not the thought. You are the sky witnessing the cloud. The cloud comes and goes, but the sky remains untouched, pure, and infinitely vast. When you understand this simple knack, the mind starts settling on its own, effortlessly, like dust settling after a storm. This effortless naturalness is the core of Tao. Tao does not believe in creating an artificial character. It does not believe in forcing you to become a saint according to a set of rules. All cultivated morality is a mask, a fake skin that you put on over your true reality. Deep down, your natural impulses remain alive, repressed in the dark basements of your unconscious, waiting for the right moment to explode. Look at your so-called holy men, your priests and saints who practice celibacy and extreme asceticism. They appear very pure on the surface. They talk beautifully about virtue and morality, but if you look deep into their minds, you will find nothing but repressed desires, sexual fantasies, and hidden violence. Their purity is a pathology, a psychological sickness caused by suppression. True purity is never cultivated. It is a natural byproduct of awareness. When you become completely conscious of your actions, your greed drops on its own, your anger drops on its own, your desires lose their grip on your being. You do not have to fight to drop them. They simply look foolish to your awakened intelligence, and they fall away like dry leaves from a tree. We live in a world that is deeply split, a world that has been made schizophrenic by the conditionings of the past. The East has chosen one extreme, the extreme of the soul, the sky, the otherworldly reality. It has praised renunciation, poverty, and isolation, and because of this extreme focus, the East became lazy, unscientific, and stagnant, suffering from centuries of starvation and physical poverty. The West chose the other extreme, the extreme of the body, the earth, the material world. It has focused on science, technology, wealth, and power, and because of this extreme focus, the West has created an affluent society that is deeply neurotic, full of madness, anxiety, and spiritual emptiness. Both extremes have failed to create a whole human being. The materialist is miserable because he has everything to live with, but nothing to live for. The spiritualist is miserable because he has a beautiful soul, but a starving, neglected body. My vision is to destroy this ancient split, to bring a magnificent synthesis of the earth and the sky. I want you to be Zorba the Buddha. Zorba represents the earth, the body, the celebration of life, the capacity to drink, dance, sing, and enjoy all the material gifts of existence. Buddha represents the sky, the soul, the depth of meditation, the height of consciousness, the absolute silence of the beyond. There is no conflict between Zorba and Buddha. They are two sides of the same coin. Your body is the temple and your soul is the deity living inside that temple. You cannot neglect the temple and hope to keep the deity alive. You cannot worship the deity while allowing the temple to crumble into dust. You must be deeply rooted in the earth like a majestic tree, so that your branches can reach up to the highest stars in the sky. The deeper your roots go into the soil, the higher your reach will be into the cosmos. A whole man is a holy man because he does not reject any part of his being. He integrates everything into a beautiful, harmonious whole. But the mind is terrified of this wholeness because wholeness requires you to accept contradictions. The logical mind functions through either or. It wants everything to be neat, clean, and categorized. It says, either you are a materialist or you are a spiritualist. Either you are good or you are bad. Either you are active or you are passive. But life does not follow your small logic. Life is dialectical. It consists of polarities. Look at nature. The day needs the night to exist. Summer needs winter. Light needs darkness. If you destroy darkness, light will disappear immediately because it needs the background of darkness to be seen. If you want true peace, you must understand that peace is not the absence of sound or activity. True peace is the center of the storm. It is a state of deep, inner stillness that remains completely untouched even when you are dancing, even when you are working in the marketplace, even when the world around you is full of chaos. This is the meaning of the ancient Taoist concept of yin and yang. They are the feminine and masculine principles that exist within every individual, regardless of their biological gender. The masculine energy is active, logical, analytical, and aggressive. The feminine energy is passive, intuitive, receptive, and soft. A balanced human being is a perfect harmony of these two energies. If you are only masculine, you become hard, violent, a destructive force in the world. If you are only feminine, you lose your strength, your capacity to act, your edge. You must learn how to move effortlessly between action and inaction, between movement and stillness. When action is needed, act with your total energy, with absolute passion. When the action is over, slide back into your inner silence, into complete passivity, like a child resting in its mother's womb. Look at how you live your life. You are constantly planning for the future, constantly running after some goal that you think will make you happy tomorrow. You think, when I get that job, when I buy that house, when I find the perfect partner, then I will relax, then I will enjoy my life. But that tomorrow never comes. For the simple reason that when tomorrow arrives, it becomes today. And your mind has already moved into the next tomorrow, planning for the next goal. You are living in a mirage. You are walking on a treadmill, moving your legs furiously but staying in the exact same place. You are missing the only reality that is available to you, the present moment. This moment, this very breath, is the only place where life happens. The past is nothing but memory, a collection of dead footprints in the sand. The future is nothing but imagination, a dream that has not yet been born. Only the present is real. Only the now is true. If you want to enter into nirvana, you do not have to wait until after death. Nirvana is not a geographical place somewhere in the sky. Nirvana is a quality of your consciousness here now. If you can drop your mind, if you can step out of your worries, your plans, your memories, and simply be present to this moment with absolute totality, you are in nirvana. Listen to the wind passing through the trees. Look at the light reflecting on the water. Feel the heartbeat inside your chest. There is no other God than this living existence. There is no other temple than this very moment. But you are fast asleep, dreaming of faraway places, worrying about your status, your money, your respectability. You are like a king who has fallen asleep and is dreaming that he is a beggar on the street, weeping for a piece of bread. All that is needed is to wake up, to open your eyes and realize that you are already in the palace, that you have never left your kingdom for a single moment. This awakening cannot happen through belief. It cannot happen by joining a church or following a dogma. Belief is a cheap escape from the arduous work of self-discovery. When you believe in something, you are simply accepting someone else's experience as your own knowledge. It is like eating a picture of food when you are starving. It may look beautiful, it may satisfy your imagination, but it will not nourish your body. You must discover the truth on your own, through your own living experience. You must have the courage to doubt every belief that has been forced into your head since your childhood. Doubt is a magnificent tool. It is the beginning of intelligence. True religion does not ask you to believe. True religion challenges you to inquire, to explore, to dive deep into your own interiority until you find the bedrock of your reality. And when you dive deep into yourself, You will be surprised to find that the ego you were so desperately trying to protect does not exist at all. The ego is nothing but a social fiction, a bundle of memories, labels, and conditionings. It is like the onion. You peel one layer, another layer appears. You go on peeling layer after layer, and in the end, nothing remains in your hand. That nothingness is your true being. That emptiness is your original face. Do not be afraid of this emptiness, because it is not a negative absence. It is a fertile space, a womb out of which the whole existence arises. When you are empty of the ego, you are full of the divine. When you are nothing, you become the whole. This is the ultimate paradox of the mystical life. By losing your separate identity, you gain the entire universe. So drop all your serious efforts to improve yourself. Drop all your heavy conditionings and spiritual ambitions. Life is not a business transaction. It is not a goal-oriented race. Life is a play, a cosmic dance, a beautiful celebration. Take your life lightly, laugh at your own absurdities, enjoy the small things that nature provides every day. When you can laugh from the very core of your being, your ego disappears, your mind stops its frantic chatter, and for a short moment you step into the eternity of the now. Let your meditation be a song. Let your discipline be a dance. Let your love be an effortless sharing of your inner light. Walk gently on this earth, keeping your roots deep in the dark soil of reality, while opening your arms to the infinite sky of consciousness, allowing the divine to sing its eternal song through the empty flute of your being. Your body is part of the earth, your soul is part of the sky, and when they meet without any inner conflict, you become a harmonious whole. But this harmony cannot be forced through the mechanical efforts of the mind, because the mind is the only disturbance on this path. People often come to me and ask how they can meditate over something without using the mind, not realizing that meditation has absolutely nothing to do with the mind. It is a state of total no mind. If you are trying to achieve stillness through the mind, you are trying to achieve the impossible. It is exactly like the ancient story of the Zen disciple who sat in the lotus posture for years, trying to freeze his body like a stone Buddha. His master watched him day after day, seeing that his sitting was not an act of relaxation, but an act of deep internal suppression enforced by his willpower. One morning, the master took a clay brick and sat down right in front of the disciple, rubbing the brick against a large flat stone with a loud, irritating noise. The disciple tried to ignore it, trying to force his mind to remain concentrated, but the noise was so persistent that his forced peace completely shattered. He opened his eyes in deep anger and shouted at his master, asking if he was trying to drive him crazy, wanting to know what he was doing. The master looked up calmly and said that he was simply trying to polish the brick to turn it into a shiny mirror. The disciple laughed at the sheer absurdity of it and told the master that he was completely mad, because no matter how long he rubbed that brick against the stone, a brick would always remain a brick and could never become a mirror. The master smiled, threw the brick into a nearby pond with a loud splash, and told the disciple that if a brick cannot be polished into a mirror, then how can you force your mind to become meditation? In that very moment, as the brick hit the water and the unexpected sound echoed through the silence, something woke up inside the disciple. His forced concentration dropped. His mind stopped its endless calculations, and he tasted the pristine flavor of a true, unforced meditation. You must understand the radical difference between concentration and meditation, because almost everyone who tries to look inward falls into the trap of concentration. Concentration is a linear focus of the mind. It is an act of narrowing down your consciousness to a single pinpoint, excluding everything else from your field of vision. It has its tremendous uses in the outside world, in the world of science and technology, because to dissect an object, you need to focus all your attention on it. But the word attention carries a deep root of internal tension. It requires you to fight against distractions, to close the windows of your senses, and to create a state of internal war. The man of concentration can be distracted by the smallest sound: a child crying across the street, a dog barking in the distance, or the roar of an airplane passing overhead will instantly shatter his artificial peace. And when he is distracted, he becomes angry, frustrated, and deep guilt arises because he thinks he has failed yet again. But the man of true meditation can never be distracted, for the simple reason that he is not trying to concentrate on anything in the first place. His awareness is not a narrow pinpoint. It is an all-inclusive, infinitely vast sky. He simply sits silently, letting everything exist simultaneously. The birds chirp, the traffic rumbles, the wind passes through the pines, and his thoughts move across the consciousness like clouds. He excludes nothing, he rejects nothing, and because he welcomes everything without any judgment, nothing has the power to distract him. The barking of the dog outside does not break his silence. It becomes the background that deepens his inner stillness. True awareness is absolute relaxation, a deep let go where you are simply a witness, a mirror reflecting whatever passes before it without clinging to any reflection. This brings us to the ultimate futility of borrowed knowledge, which is the heaviest blanket suffocating your natural intelligence. Knowledge is nothing but accumulated information data collected from the outside, descriptions of the truth given to you by others. It is immensely useful if you want to navigate the marketplace, if you want to become a scientist, an engineer, or an expert in a specific field, because science is a collective, traditional endeavor that builds upon the discoveries of the past. But in the inner world, knowledge is a magnificent barrier. The deeper you go into your own being, the more useless your degrees, your scriptures, and your learned definitions become. I remember a man who came to see me in Varanasi many years ago, who was famous all over the world because he had successfully acquired 30 different postgraduate degrees. He had spent his entire life moving from one university subject to another, passing examinations, accumulating certificates, and stuffing his memory with thousands of books. But when I sat down to talk with him, I was absolutely amazed to find that he was one of the most stupid, mediocre human beings I had ever encountered. His mind was completely full of words, but his own unique intelligence was buried deep under that mountains of garbage. He was immensely egoistic about his knowledge, bragging about his achievements, completely blind to the fact that his ego was the very proof of his internal ignorance. True intelligence can never be egoistic, because the very first dawn of intelligence shows you that the ego is a false fiction, a ghost that does not exist. Look at the comical nature of the knowledgeable ego, how it constantly seeks validation even in the realm of spirituality. It reminds me of the story of the rabbi and the cantor who were standing inside the synagogue during a holy festival, weeping bitterly, beating their breasts in front of the altar, and crying out to the sky that they were nothing, absolutely nothing, just dust in the eyes of the Lord. The janitor of the synagogue, who was sweeping the floor in the back, heard their prayers, became deeply moved by their spirit, put down his broom, ran to the altar, and started beating his breast as well, crying out that he too was nothing, absolutely nothing. The cantor immediately nudged the rabbi with his elbow, pointed at the back, and whispered with deep aristocratic offense, "Look who thinks he is nothing. Even to be nothing, the ego demands a monopoly, a special privilege. The knowledge you carry creates this subtle, pious pride, making you believe that you are holier, wiser, and higher than the ordinary masses. But your knowledge is entirely borrowed, and whenever life presents you with a real, unpredictable situation, your formulas fail completely. It is like the theologian who decided to escape from prison alongside a common thief. As they were scaling the high outer wall in the dark, the thief slipped, causing some rocks to rattle to the ground. The guard immediately yelled out into the darkness, wanting to know who was there. The thief, functioning from pure, spontaneous intuition, immediately meowed like a cat, and the guard relaxed, thinking it was just a stray animal. A few minutes later, the theologian was climbing over the same spot, and his heavy robes knocked a loose brick down with a loud crash. The guard jumped up again and shouted, "Who is there?" The theologian, relying on his academic, logical mind, called back out loud, "It is nothing, just another cat." This is what happens when you rely on formulas. When you try to face the fluid, ever-changing reality of life through dead information, you must realize that the path of true awareness requires you to drop all your learning, to step out of the heavy armor of the mind, and to enter a state of complete, innocent not knowing. Only then do you become a child again, and only as a child can you enter into the mystery of existence. But you are terrified of losing your knowledge because it gives you a false sense of control. It makes you feel safe. You are like the young bride whose mother took her to the chicken coop the day before her wedding to show her how the rooster acts, telling her that the husband would do something similar on the wedding night. The poor girl took the information literally, without any personal understanding. So when the husband walked into the bedroom wearing his pajamas, he found her lying on the bed naked, but wearing a heavy military helmet on her head. When he asked her in utter bewilderment what the helmet was for, she looked at him suspiciously and said that he could do whatever he wanted with her body, but she was not going to let him peck her head. Your borrowed knowledge always creates this kind of absolute absurdity in your life. You read about love in books, you read about meditation in scriptures, you listen to my words and try to turn them into a system of thought, but you completely miss the living experience. I am not here to give you a new philosophy, because philosophy is nothing but an exercise in thinking about things that are fundamentally unthinkable. I am here to help you open your eyes so that you can see the light on your own. This requires you to face the reality of your aloneness, which is the most beautiful, pristine peak of human consciousness. But whenever I speak about aloneness, your mind immediately translates it as loneliness, because you have never tasted the purity of being alone. Loneliness is a state of deep sickness, a negative feeling of missing the other, an internal emptiness that aches for something outside to fill it. Because you suffer from loneliness, you desperately run into relationships, you seek crowds, you create endless noise and distractions just to escape from your own presence. But when you enter into a relationship out of your loneliness, that relationship is doomed to fail, because you are using the other person as a drug to forget your inner pain. Two lonely people together do not create love. they multiply their misery. True aloneness is entirely different. It is a positive state of absolute abundance, a profound contentment where your own presence is so radiant, so full of bliss, that you do not need anyone else to complete you. You are whole within yourself. It is like the old Christian priest who was shipwrecked on a small deserted island in the middle of the ocean. He survived there completely alone for 20 long years, with no human contact whatsoever. When a passing ship finally spotted him and the captain rowed ashore to rescue him, the priest proudly offered to show him the miniature city he had built out of mud and wood over those 2 decades. He showed him the small houses, the neat paths, and then he pointed to a beautifully crafted Catholic church, explaining that he went there every Sunday to worship. The captain looked across the path and noticed that right in front of it, the priest had built an identical though slightly uglier church. Puzzled, the captain asked him why one man living completely alone on an island would ever need to build 2 separate churches. The priest looked at the second building with deep satisfaction and said that the first one was the church he went to, and the second one was the church he absolutely refused to go to. Even in the middle of a deserted ocean, the old habits of division, conflict, and exclusion remain alive inside the mind if you have only adjusted to loneliness without transforming it into true aloneness. The only way to discover this pristine aloneness is to return to your original childlike intelligence, which the society has systematically covered with layers of garbage. I always say that children are immensely intelligent, and many people look at me with skepticism because they confuse intelligence with information. If you ask a child a question that depends on memory, on school books, on historical facts, he will look ignorant because his memory has not yet been filled with dead data. But if you ask him a real, immediate question that requires a spontaneous response, you will see a flash of pure, unpolluted intelligence that can leave any university professor completely speechless. It reminds me of the great Sufi mystic Hassan, who was asked on his deathbed who his master had been, since he had never openly named a single teacher throughout his long life. Hassan smiled and told his disciples that he had learned from many unique sources, but his very first master was a small child. He told the story of how he had entered a strange town just after sunset, carrying his heavy load of scholarly knowledge, looking for an audience to impress. He came across a small boy who was walking towards the local temple, carefully carrying a small earthen lamp with a burning flame. Hassan, wanting to play a clever intellectual game with the child, stopped him and said that he noticed the boy had lit the lamp himself, so could he please show him exactly where that light had come from? He wanted to see if the child would talk about physics or metaphysics. The little boy looked at Hassan's face, laughed naturally, and simply blew the flame out. Then he looked back into Hassan's eyes and said that the light had just disappeared right in front of him. So if the great scholar could first tell him exactly where it had gone, then he would gladly tell him where it had come from. Hassan was utterly dumbfounded. His entire structure of logic, his definitions, and his philosophical theories vanished in a single second. He realized that he knew absolutely nothing on his own, that he had spent his life playing with empty words. He bowed down right there on the street, touched the small child's feet, and accepted him as his first true master, because that child had shown him the ultimate boundary of the thinking mind. The society cannot afford to let this childlike intelligence survive, because an intelligent person can never be controlled, can never be forced into a mold, can never be turned into a submissive slave for the state or the church. The educational system is designed to kill your natural spontaneity and replace it with ambition, greed, and fear. It teaches you to always be the first in the queue, to compete with others, to build a hard, rock-like ego so that you can fight your way through the struggle of life. It turns you into an ambitious machine. Look at the small child who came home from his very first day of school with a big, joyful smile on his face. The mother was delighted and asked him if he really loved school that much. The boy looked at her with pure, unclouded vision and told her not to be silly, because she must never confuse the joy of going to school with the absolute ecstasy of coming back home from it. The child sees the truth instantly, before the conditioning sets in, before he learns the art of lying to himself and to others. He can see that the mother's standard advice to go to a party and have a good time while behaving perfectly is a complete contradiction. Telling her that she must decide which one it is going to be, because if he behaves, he cannot have a good time, and if he has a good time, he cannot behave. When you come face to face with me, you are coming face to face with the mirror. That is the only thing I am, a pure, unclouded mirror. I have no identity of my own, no doctrine to sell you, no character to impose upon you. If you come close to me carrying your deep internal ugliness, your fanaticism, and your hidden rage, the mirror will reflect that ugliness back to you with absolute honesty. And instead of transforming your face, you will become angry at the mirror. That is exactly what happened with the fanatic scholar who became so agitated by my words that he threw a knife at me right here in the discourse hall. He could not tolerate what the mirror was showing him. His Hindu chauvinism, his traditional pride, and his inner darkness were exposed, and out of sheer egoistic terror, he tried to shatter the mirror. If you come to me with a heart full of love and a longing for freedom, you will see a beautiful luminous face inside the mirror, and you will become infatuated with me, thinking that this beauty belongs to me. But both reactions are wrong. The credit belongs entirely to you. If you see darkness, it is your darkness. If you see light, it is your light. I do not take any credit for your enlightenment, and I do not expect even a simple thank you from you. On the contrary, I am thankful to you when you become a mirror yourself, because then my mirror becomes free to help other travelers who are still lost in the dark. Look at how terrified you are of showing your real face. You have become so accustomed to wearing masks that you wear them even when you are completely alone, even when you are asleep. Psychologists have stated that if every human being on this earth suddenly decided to speak the absolute naked truth for just 24 hours, without any politeness, without any formal manners or social diplomacy, the entire structure of human society would fall apart in a single day. All friendships would vanish, all marriages would end, all family structures would dissolve, because your relationships are entirely built upon beautiful lies, upon mutual pretense. You act nice, you act formal, because you are terrified that if the other person sees your real thoughts, your repressed desires, and your hidden scorpions, they will run away from you. That is why husbands and wives who live together 24 hours a day become so dull, so insensitive, and so full of silent rage. They can keep the mask up for a few hours during a date on the beach or under a full moon, but when they share a bedroom day after day, the mask inevitably slips. They start seeing each other's true colors, and because they do not know how to absorb the truth, their life becomes a continuous petty warfare. It reminds me of the three distinguished Cambridge dons who went for a walk along the river on a scorching summer afternoon. Finding a completely secluded spot, they could not resist the temptation to strip naked and jump into the refreshing water for a swim. Just as they came out of the water, completely naked in the buff, a boat full of young female undergraduates suddenly rounded the bend. In absolute panic, two of the dons immediately grabbed their discarded clothes and desperately covered their middles, while the third don threw his shirt entirely over his head, leaving his lower body completely exposed. Once the girls had rowed past, The first two dawns turned on him in absolute anger, wanting to know why on earth he had covered his head instead of his middle. The third dawn looked at them calmly and replied that he didn't know about them, but where he came from. People recognized him by his face. You are constantly trying to cover your face, constantly trying to maintain a respectable image before the crowd. But God will recognize you only by your original face, by the face you had before you were ever born, the face that remains when all your worldly identities are burned to ashes. The Master's entire function is to peel you like an onion, removing layer after layer of artificial masks until nothing but your naked reality remains. It is an arduous, highly painful process, and your mind will resist it at every single step. You will find 1,001 rationalizations to escape from the mirror. You will talk about your duties, your philosophy, your respectability, but you are simply fleeing from your own emptiness. Look at the absurdity of your search for nirvana, as if it is a prize to be won in the future, a geographical paradise waiting for you after you die. A judge came to me recently and asked if a man of his profession has any chance of ever entering into nirvana, suggesting that if the answer is no, he is perfectly ready to change his profession and become a homeopathic doctor. I laughed, because changing your outer label is not going to change your inner state of sleep. There is a beautiful reference in the inner records of existence about a soccer game that was held between heaven and hell. Saint Peter and Satan were organizing the match, and Saint Peter looked at Satan with great confidence, telling him that there was absolutely no way hell could win the game, because all the simple, pure, and innocent soccer players naturally come to heaven when they die. Satan smiled calmly and told Saint Peter not to worry at all, because even though heaven had all the finest players, hell had a tremendous advantage. They had every single referee and judge that had ever lived on the earth. And if you change your profession to a doctor, it will not help you either, because doctors are often seen at the back door of heaven, standing exactly where the commercial suppliers enter. The problem does not lie in what you do. The problem lies in the absolute absence of awareness while you are doing it. A judge can remain a judge, a doctor can remain a doctor, a king can remain a king, and even a thief can become completely enlightened if he learns the supreme knack of being utterly here now. There is a magnificent Zen parable about a master thief who had never been caught in his entire life. His fame was so vast that even the king respected his flawless skill, and rich citizens felt a strange sense of prestige if their houses were visited by him, because it proved to the society that they possessed treasures of immense value. As the master thief became very old, his young son came to him and begged him to teach him the secret art of thievery before he passed away. The old man looked at his son and said that thievery is not a science that can be taught through words or books. It is a delicate knack that can only be caught through immediate presence and intuition. He told the boy to follow him that very night. They walked through the silent streets in the dead of winter, broke through the heavy wall of a wealthy mansion, and entered the deep darkness of the innermost treasure room. The young boy was trembling with terror, his body drenched in cold perspiration, constantly looking over his shoulder, terrified of being caught. But the old man moved with absolute grace, without a single trace of worry, as if he were walking inside his own house. He opened a massive wooden closet, gestured for his son to step inside to inspect the gold, and the moment the boy entered, the father locked the heavy door from the outside, shouted, "Thief! Thief!" at the top of his lungs, and immediately vanished into the night. The entire mansion woke up in an instant. Servants rushed through the corridors carrying torches, checking every corner. The young boy, locked inside the dark closet, felt his mind completely stop. All his logical thinking, his calculations, and his pre-planned ideas became totally useless. He was facing the terrifying, unpredictable, unknown, and in that absolute crisis, his mind vanished and pure intuition woke up. He heard a maidservant approaching the closet with a candle, checking to see if a rat was biting the expensive clothes inside. Operating from a space beyond the intellect, the boy immediately started scratching the wood from the inside, making the exact sound of a trapped rat. The maid unlocked the door, turned her candle inward, and in that split second, the boy blew out the flame, pushed her aside, and ran into the garden. A dozen guards followed him with lanterns, cornering him near an old stone well. Seeing that escape was impossible through logic, the boy picked up a large rock, threw it violently into the deep water of the well, and immediately hid behind a thick tree. The guards heard the loud splash, assumed the thief had jumped into the well to drown, and decided to leave him there until the morning. The boy ran all the way home, furious, ready to kill his old father for betraying him. He burst into the bedroom and found the old man fast asleep, snoring peacefully. He pulled the blanket away and shouted in deep rage, demanding to know if his father was completely insane. The old man opened one eye, smiled beautifully, and told his son that there was no need to tell the story, because the fact that he was back proved that he had caught the true spirit of the knack. He had learned to function from the spontaneous, intuitive center of his being, where mind is not, where formulas are not, where only the immediate present guides your actions. This is the ultimate secret of no mind, to allow yourself to be so totally in the now that your calculating intellect is completely bypassed. You do not need to believe in my words, because belief is a false currency that you throw into the wishing well of existence, hoping for a cheap reward. A young man came to me recently and said that he cannot try to drop his ego without first believing that life will be better without an ego, arguing that since he cannot know the state of egolessness beforehand, belief is a logical necessity. I told him that I am not asking him to drop his ego, because you can only drop something that exists in the first place. The ego is a mirage, a false shadow created by your lack of awareness. You do not need to drop it. You simply need to look at it, to look into it with absolute unclouded consciousness. When you bring a light into a dark room, you do not have to fight with the darkness to throw it out of the window. The moment the light is there, the darkness is found no more. You have already tasted magnificent moments of absolute egolessness throughout your life, but you have simply failed to recognize them. When you look at a breathtaking sunset over the mountains, for a single second, the immense beauty possesses you so totally that you forget your name, your problems, your bank account, and your identity. Only the glowing colors, the shifting clouds, and the deep silence of the ending day remain. In that single second, you are egoless, and a wave of pure ecstasy sweeps through your entire being. It is exactly what happened to Ramakrishna when he was a boy of 13, walking along the edge of a silent lake. A massive, pitch-black storm cloud, shining like rich velvet, covered the setting sun, and suddenly a large flock of pure white cranes flew up from the reeds, moving in a perfect line across that dark background like a flash of lightning. The absolute contrast of the white birds against the black sky was so extraordinarily beautiful that the boy forgot himself completely. He fell to the earth, entirely possessed by the majesty of the moment, entering a state of deep satori that lasted for hours. When he came back to his ordinary senses, he was crying, not because he was in pain, but because he had been pulled back into the narrow prison of the ordinary world after tasting the infinite ocean of the divine. You have known these moments too, in deep love, in creative passion, and in moments of unexpected silence. You do not need to believe me. You simply need to look into your own past, look into your own interiority, and discover the path to that inner lake where the white cranes are always flying across the velvet sky. The soul of man loves purity, but his mind is often rebellious. The mind of man loves stillness, but his desires draw him into activity. This is the ultimate friction that every seeker experiences within his internal architecture. You want to be still, you want to sit silently and enjoy the peace of your own being, but the moment you sit down, a great rebellion starts inside your head. 1,001 desires start pulling you in different directions, whispering that there is something incredibly important waiting for you in the future, that you are wasting your time just sitting here doing nothing. This rebellion of the mind is not an accident. It is its very nature. The mind can only exist through movement, through conflict, through running after something that it does not possess. The moment you become completely still, the mind dies. And because it is terrified of its own death, it creates an endless series of desires to keep you occupied, to keep you running on the treadmill of the marketplace. It gives you the illusion that you are moving forward, that you are achieving great things, but you are simply moving in circles, repeating the same mechanical patterns life after life. When a man is constantly able to govern his desires, his mind becomes spontaneously still. But remember, the word govern here does not mean to suppress. It does not mean to fight or to create a moral character through willpower. All suppression is an act of violence, and violence can never lead to true peace. If you try to control your desires through sheer force, you are simply pushing them deep down into your unconscious, where they will turn into a sour poison, waiting for the right opportunity to explode. True governance comes only through deep understanding, through clear perception, through the light of your own awareness. When you look at a desire with absolute clarity, without any judgment, without calling it good or bad, you see its ultimate futility. You see that it promises a mountain of happiness but delivers only a drop of fleeting pleasure, followed by a vast ocean of frustration and despair. In that very seeing, the desire loses its grip on your soul. It drops away from you naturally, effortlessly, like dry leaves falling from a tree. And when your desires drop away, the mind becomes spontaneously still. It settles down on its own, like muddy water settling when it is left undisturbed. When the mind is completely unclouded, the soul is seen to be pure. The purity of the soul is not a virtue that you have to cultivate. It is not a character that you have to practice. It is your very nature. It has always been there, pristine and untouched, but it was covered by the thick smoke of your desires, by the heavy clouds of your thinking mind. When the clouds disappear, the blue sky reveals itself in all its infinite beauty. Then, with absolute certainty, the 6 desires will cease to be begotten, and the 3 poisons will be eliminated and dissolved. These three poisons of human consciousness are ignorance, attachment, and aversion. They are the root causes of all your misery, all your anxiety, all your psychological sickness. Ignorance means you do not know who you are. You are living in total darkness, identifying yourself with your body, with your mind, with your labels and social masks. Out of this ignorance arises attachment, the desperate clinging to things and people, the illusion that someone else can give you happiness, that money or power can fulfill your empty soul. And out of attachment arises aversion, the deep hatred, the anger, the fear of losing what you possess, the resistance to anything that threatens your fragile ego. These poisons cannot be cured through medicine. They cannot be removed through moral rules. They can only be dissolved through the fire of pure meditation. The reason men do not possess the ability to achieve this is because their minds are not clear and their desires are unrestrained. You live in a constant state of internal fog. Your vision is clouded by the conditionings of the past, by the prejudices of your society, by the ready-made answers handed down to you by the priests. You do not look at reality with your own eyes. You look through the spectacles of your scriptures, your ideologies, your political beliefs. Because your mind is not clear, you fall into the trap of calculation. You try to turn even your spiritual journey into a business deal, looking for a reward, calculating how much you have to sacrifice and what you will get in return. This calculative mind can never understand the mystery of surrender. It is exactly like the rich Russian woman who came to see George Gurdjieff during the early days of his work. She was exceptionally wealthy, carrying beautiful diamond ornaments and precious jewels with her. The moment she arrived, Gurdjieff looked into her eyes and told her that if she wanted to be his disciple, she must immediately surrender all her valuable jewels and gold to him. The woman became terrified. Her calculative mind started racing, wondering if this man was a genuine master or just a clever charlatan trying to exploit her. She went to her room to think it over, completely torn by her greed and her desire for spiritual growth. She shared her room with another wealthy woman who had been with Gurdjieff for a long time, and she asked her for advice, wanting to know what to do. The old disciple laughed and told her that there was no need to worry at all, because the exact same thing had happened to her when she first arrived. She told her that she had surrendered all her diamonds without a single thought, and the very next morning, Gurdjieff had returned everything back to her, explaining that it was just a test to see her devotion. The new woman became immensely happy. Her calculative mind found a beautiful escape. She thought, if that is the case, I will gladly surrender everything right now, knowing that tomorrow it will all be returned to me. She ran to Gurdjieff, handed over her entire treasure with a big smile, and waited. But the next morning came. A week passed, a month passed, and Gurdjieff never returned a single diamond. The woman became deeply distrustful, full of rage, left the commune, and started spreading rumors all over the country that Gurdjieff was a thief and a fraud. The old disciple went to Gurdjieff and asked him why he had returned the jewels to her but kept the new woman's treasure. Gurdjieff laughed and said, "You surrendered instantly, without a calculation, out of pure love and trust, so there was no need for me to keep your ornaments. Your surrender was real." But this new woman calculated her surrender. She only gave me the diamonds because she was certain she would get them back. Her surrender was a fake gesture, a business transaction. By keeping her jewels, I have killed two birds with one stone. The commune got the money we needed for our work, and we got rid of a completely stupid, calculative woman who would have never grown in consciousness anyway. The calculative mind can never pass through the golden gate of Tao, because it is always looking for a guarantee, always planning for its own security. But life is fundamentally insecure, and that insecurity is its supreme beauty. If you want absolute security, you will have to enter your grave, because only in death is there no danger, no change, no risk. If you want to be truly alive, you must learn how to live in the open sky of insecurity, trusting the natural flow of existence. He who has the power to transcend his desires, looking within and contemplating mind, realizes that in his mind, mind is not. This is one of the most profound, most revolutionary utterances ever made. When you look deeply into your own head, when you observe your thoughts with absolute, unclouded awareness, you suddenly make a magnificent discovery. You find that there is no such thing as a mind at all. The mind is not a solid entity. It is not a tangible organ. It is just a process, a continuous stream of passing thoughts, memories, and imaginations. It is exactly like a crowd standing on the street. If all the people leave, the crowd disappears completely, because the crowd was nothing but the individual people. When you watch your thoughts silently, without clinging to them, the thoughts start disappearing one by one, and when all thoughts vanish, you look inside and you find that the mind is not. Only an infinite, silent emptiness remains, a pure space of awareness that has no boundaries, no limitations. This emptiness is your true being. Looking without and contemplating form, he realizes that in form, form is not. When your inner vision becomes perfectly clear, you look at the outside world, you look at the magnificent shapes, the colors, the bodies, and the structures, and you realize that they are not separate, solid realities. They are constantly changing, constantly moving, constantly dissolving back into the ocean of energy out of which they arose. What appears to be a solid rock is nothing but a dance of millions of tiny electrons moving at an incredible speed. The form is only a temporary manifestation, a passing wave on the surface of the infinite deep. In form is not. It is all emptiness. It is all a divine play of energy. Looking at things still more remote and contemplating matter, he realizes that in matter is not. Science has arrived at the exact same conclusion in the 20th century. For centuries, the materialists believed that matter was the only solid reality, that everything else was an illusion. But as scientists started dissecting the atom, digging deeper into the very core of matter, they found that matter completely disappeared. It evaporated into pure energy, into waves of probability that cannot even be defined by ordinary logic. The solid world vanished, leaving behind only a mysterious, cosmic dance. The mystics discovered this thousands of years ago through the simple art of looking within. They found that both the inner mind and the outer matter are made of the exact same stuff, the stuff that dreams are made of. It is all a beautiful, moving reflection of the one nameless, formless Tao. But you are terrified of this emptiness because you have built your entire life around your conditionings, around your mechanical habits. You carry the heavy hangovers of your past, and even when you come to a new space, you try to interpret everything through your old patterns. You are like the old communist chief in Moscow who saw an elderly man kneeling in front of a religious icon on a cold winter morning. The chief stopped, looked down at the old man with arrogance, and asked if he was praying. The old man replied that yes, he was praying for the leaders of the country, praying for the Communist Party chief and his ministers. The chief became very pleased. His ego expanded, and he asked if the old man used to pray for the Tsar in the old days as well. The old man said that yes, he used to pray for the Tsar exactly the same way. The chief smiled and asked if his old prayers had been of any practical use to the Tsar, and the old man looked up at him calmly and said, "Well, yes, they killed the Tsar, didn't they?" Old habits and old ways of thinking go on continuing deep in your unconscious, and you go on repeating them without any awareness of what you are doing. You carry your traditional labels like a heavy armor, refusing to step into the freedom of the present moment. Look at how you live your relationships, how you constantly carry your past injuries, your expectations, and your endless conditionings into the sacred space of love. You think you are loving someone, but your love is entirely colored by your unconscious desires. A man and a woman are lying in bed together, making love in the dark, but they are not truly present to each other. The bed is not occupied by only two people. It is crowded by four. The man is fantasizing about a beautiful movie star he saw on a billboard, and the woman is imagining a famous athlete she saw on television, and through these false images, they manage to find a small, mechanical satisfaction. They need the darkness, they need to put the lights out so that their imagination can wander freely, because they are terrified of facing the actual reality of the person sitting right next to them. You are constantly living in a world of projections, hiding your true face from your partner and forcing them to hide their face from you. And then you wonder why your life has become so miserable, why your love has lost all its romance, all its poetry. You have turned your home into a psychological battlefield where two egos are constantly trying to dominate each other, constantly dropping subtle hints of resentment, and constantly fighting for control. I remember a man who came to see me many years ago, complaining that his wife had deserted him for the 5th time, running away to her mother's house after a petty argument. He told me that he was rushing to the local newspaper office to place a massive advertisement to bring her back. I asked him what he was going to write in the advertisement, and he said he was going to write, "Do not come back and all will be forgiven. This is the true state of your relationships. You cannot live together and you cannot live apart. When you are together, you create an absolute hell for each other through your possessiveness, your jealousy, and your constant logic chopping arguments. When you are apart, you feel a deep, aching loneliness, and you start fantasizing about how beautiful it would be if the other person came back. You are caught in a vicious circle, moving continuously between the pain of loneliness and the suffocation of togetherness, simply because you do not know how to be alone within your own being. You have never experienced the beauty of your own pristine presence. You must realize that love can only flower when you are completely independent of the other person, when your aloneness has become a blissful, self-contented reality. A person who is blissful in his aloneness does not enter into a relationship to grab something from the other. He does not come like a beggar holding an empty bowl, crying for affection. He comes like an emperor, overflowing with his own joy, wanting to share his abundance with another traveler. His love is not a need, it is a luxury. It is a natural sharing of his inner light. And when two independent, self-contented individuals come together out of their abundance, their love creates a magnificent harmony that carries no possessiveness, no jealousy, no hidden desire to dominate. They do not become masters of each other. They remain beautiful companions, unique friends, walking hand in hand through the incredible adventure of life. They respect each other's freedom. They respect each other's privacy. And because they do not take their relationship for granted, their love remains fresh, alive, and full of surprise every single day. But the society does not teach you this independence. It teaches you how to become codependent, how to build your entire existence around external security. It tells you to get married, to buy a house, to settle down, and to plan for your old age. It turns your life into a highly predictable, highly boring routine where everything is planned from the cradle to the grave. And you follow this routine because you are terrified of the unknown. You are like the poor Italian villager who had never been on a train in his entire life and decided to go to the city station just to see one. He was standing mindlessly on the rail tracks when a massive express train approached from behind, blowing its whistle with a loud roar. Before the poor man could even realize what was happening, the train struck him violently, throwing him several meters through the air into a ditch. He survived by a miracle, but he had to spend several months in the city hospital, his body broken, recovering from multiple injuries. During his long stay in the hospital, his wife used the substantial insurance money they received to purchase a magnificent, ultra-modern flat in the center of the city, fully equipped with all the latest electrical appliances. Once he was fully recovered and discharged from the hospital, the husband arrived at his luxurious new home for the very first time. To celebrate his miraculous recovery, the wife decided to bake a beautiful cake and put a brand new, modern whistling kettle on the stove to make some fresh coffee. As the water reached the boiling point, the small kettle suddenly let out a sharp, high-pitched whistle. The husband froze in absolute terror. His heart stopped. He rushed into the kitchen like a madman, grabbed a heavy iron poker, smashed the new kettle to pieces on the floor, and started kicking the broken metal with deep, violent rage. The wife ran in screaming, wanting to know what on earth he was doing, and the husband looked up at her, panting, his eyes wild with fear, and shouted, "These dangerous monsters! You have got to kill them while they are still young. Your fear of the unknown always creates this kind of absolute paranoia in your life. Because you have been hurt in the past, because your mind carries the traumatic memories of your childhood conditionings, you look at every new situation through the lenses of fear. Whenever life brings a fresh breeze, whenever existence presents you with an unpredictable opening, you immediately shrink back, you close your doors, You smash the opportunity before it can even unfold. You prefer the old, comfortable prison of your habits because it is known, because you can predict exactly what will happen tomorrow. You would rather live a dead, routine life full of familiar miseries than risk stepping into the uncharted territory of freedom where everything is wild, alive, and completely unpredictable. But I tell you, true religiousness means to have the courage to step into the unknown every single day, leaving all your past baggage behind, facing life with absolute nudity, with an innocent, unclouded heart. This is the path of Tao. Tao does not give you a map. It does not give you a guide hook with ready-made directions. It simply gives you the intelligence to respond to the present moment as it unfolds. It requires you to be fluid, like water, adapting yourself to whatever terrain life brings before you. If you are hard like a rock, you will be broken by the current. If you are soft like water, you will naturally find your way to the infinite ocean. But to be like water, you must first drop your heavy ego. You must drop your spiritual ambitions, your calculations, and your constant desire to be special. You must become completely ordinary. This ordinariness is one of the most beautiful, most rare achievements in human consciousness. To be absolutely ordinary means you do not have any image to defend, you do not have any status to maintain, you do not care whether the crowd respects you or condemns you. You are simply yourself, breathing in the sun, listening to the birds, enjoying your food, living your life with absolute totality and joy. Look at the trees, look at the rivers, look at the stars. They are all absolutely ordinary, and because they are ordinary, they are extraordinarily beautiful. A rose flower does not try to become a lotus. A pine tree does not suffer from an inferiority complex because it cannot produce sweet mangoes. They simply enjoy their own unique being, fulfilling their natural destiny without any internal conflict, without any psychological comparison. It is only man who has fallen from this natural state of Tao, because man has been poisoned by the idea of achievement, by the disease of comparison. You are constantly comparing yourself with your neighbors, with your friends, with your colleagues, wondering who has more money, who has a more beautiful partner, who carries more prestige in the society. And this continuous comparison keeps your mind in a state of eternal hell, full of jealousy, full of frustration, full of self-hatred. You cannot enjoy your own house because your neighbor has built a bigger mansion. You cannot enjoy your own life because someone else has climbed higher on the ladder of political power. You have become an exile from your own paradise. My entire effort here is to pull you out of this collective madness. to bring you back to your own natural center. I am not a priest trying to teach you how to become a saint. I am a friend trying to remind you of the beautiful Buddha that is already sleeping inside your heart. You do not need to practice any artificial discipline. You do not need to renounce your family or escape to the mountains. You simply need to bring the light of awareness into your everyday life. When you are eating your lunch, eat it with absolute presence, tasting every single bite, completely relaxed in the moment. When you are walking in the garden, walk with deep meditativeness, feeling the earth under your bare feet, looking at the vibrant colors of the flowers as if you are seeing them for the very first time. When you are listening to me, do not try to analyze my words with your logical mind. Do not try to fit my statements into your pre-existing philosophies. Simply listen to my voice. The way you listen to the soothing sound of running water or the magnificent song of a bird in the early morning. Let the silence between my words enter into your heart, calming your restless thoughts and opening the golden gate of your interiority. You are carrying an infinite treasure inside your own being, a fountain of eternal joy, a light that can never be extinguished by death. But you are looking for this treasure in all the wrong places, wandering like a beggar through the streets of the marketplace, knocking on doors that are empty, crying for a love that cannot be found outside. Turn your vision inward. Step out of the frantic chatter of your thinking mind and enter into the silent space of your own no-mind. Realize that your mind is nothing but a passing shadow, that in mind is not. Realize that the outside world is nothing but a fluid dance of divine energy, that in form is not. When this realization dawns upon you, all your anxieties vanish in a single second. All your desires lose their grip on your soul, and the three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and aversion are completely dissolved and eliminated from your life. You become whole, you become integrated, you become a magnificent synthesis of the earth and the sky. You become Zorba the Buddha, living your life with absolute passion, absolute celebration, while remaining deeply anchored in the infinite silence of the eternal Tao. The Supreme Tao has no desires, yet by its power the entire universe moves in perfect harmony. The stars revolve in their orbits, the seasons change, the trees bloom, and the rivers flow into the ocean without a single effort, without a single command. When you align your life with this natural law, when you step out of your egoistic struggles and allow yourself to be guided by the effortless current of existence, your life becomes a beautiful, unfolding miracle. You do not have to worry about tomorrow You do not have to plan for your salvation because Tao takes care of everything. Tao nurtures you, Tao breathes through you, Tao protects your steps even when you are walking through the dark night of the soul. All that is required of you is a deep, absolute trust, a trust that carries no calculation, a trust that is as innocent and pure as that of a newborn child resting on its mother's breast. Shed your heavy armor, throw away your borrowed knowledge, break your artificial masks, and jump into the uncharted sea of the present moment with a heart full of gratitude and a soul that is completely free. Let this here now moment be the ultimate threshold where your mind dissolves into nothingness, where your original face is revealed in all its pristine glory, and where you pass through the magnificent golden gate into the eternity of the divine. This organic harmony of your inner being is the very essence of your baseline reality, yet your analytical mind continuously tries to turn it into an intellectual battleground. You want to force your sky and your earth to meet on your own terms through your own egoistic control, but the whole cannot be dictated by the part. It is like the cuckoo bird that calls loudly and insistently in the distance. She does not announce any profound metaphysical theory. She does not read from any sacred scripture. She simply sings out of her total, unforced presence. Her song is an expression of her absolute alignment with the Tao. If you try to analyze her music, if you try to classify it logically, you miss the living melody completely. You must learn how to listen to your own life with that same innocent presence, without the constant interruption of your thinking intellect. But you are terrified of this simple relaxation because the moment you stop calculating, the mirror of existence shows you your true state of sleep. You look inside and you realize that you have been wandering through the world like a ghost, collecting labels, chasing illusions, and completely ignoring the immense reality of the present moment. True watchfulness does not mean you become indifferent to the world. It simply means you stop identifying with the passing clouds of your mind. When an angry thought arises, you let it pass without becoming angry yourself. When a greedy desire knocks on your door, you watch it walk by without becoming a partner to it. You remain a pure, unaffected witness, a clear mirror that reflects everything but retains absolutely nothing. This is the supreme alchemy of meditation, to transform your chaotic internal turmoil into a pristine, unclouded lake of silence. And when your inner world becomes perfectly still, the entire cosmos is seen to be united within your own heart. There is no longer any separation between the material and the spiritual, between the profane and the sacred. Everything becomes a single beautiful manifestation of the divine. But to arrive at this state of total integration, you must first have the courage to face your deep internal wounds, to look into the mirror with absolute honesty, and to drop all the plastic masks you have worn for centuries to deceive yourself and the crowd. Look at how much energy you waste every single day trying to maintain your respectability, trying to live according to the expectations of the society. You act formal, you act polite, you act religious because you are terrified that if the others see your naked reality, they will reject you, they will drop you from their collective structures. But I tell you, a respectability that is built upon a foundation of lies is a heavy golden chain around your neck. It does not protect you. It suffocates your unique soul. If you want to grow in consciousness, you must be ready to look into the mirror of relationship and face your true colors, no matter how painful it may be. Relationship is the ultimate threshold where your repressions are exposed, where your hidden scorpions and scrawling sculptures of ego are brought into the light of awareness. It is not an accident that your marriages and love affairs turn into bitter battlegrounds so quickly after the honeymoon is over. The honeymoon is nothing but a mutual pretense where both partners wear their finest masks. The moment you start living together 24 hours a day, the masks inevitably begin to slip. The hidden realities explode into the open, and because you do not know how to absorb the truth, you turn your home into a psychological hell. If you want to move beyond this painful circle, you must learn the magnificent art of being alone within your own interiority. Aloneness is entirely different from loneliness. Loneliness is a state of deep sickness where you are missing the other, an internal emptiness that begs for external validation. Aloneness is a state of absolute abundance, a radiant contentment where your own presence is so blissful, so complete, that you do not need anyone else to fulfill you. When you are centered in your aloneness, you do not enter a relationship like a beggar carrying an empty bowl. You come like an emperor, overflowing with your own joy, wanting to share your light with another traveler. Your love becomes an effortless luxury, a natural flowering of your freedom, carrying no possessiveness, no jealousy, and no hidden desire to control the other. You remain beautiful companions, respecting each other's unique individuality and walking hand in hand through the incredible adventure of existence. To nourish this inner freedom, to keep this digital commune growing, and to help spread these timeless insights to all the empty hands across the globe. It is tremendously beautiful to interact with this transmission by leaving your deepest reflection in the comments below, or hitting the like button to help this vibe radiate further. If you feel a deep wave of gratitude arising for these silent moments we share, You are always welcome to express your appreciation by clicking the join button to become a member of our inner circle, or supporting our work directly through a contribution via Super Thanks. Let it not be a calculated transaction. Let it be a spontaneous gesture of love, a natural sharing of your abundance to ensure that these seeds of awareness can find a fertile home in the hearts of seekers everywhere. The mind is always terrified of this spontaneous sharing because it lives exclusively through logic, through calculation, through the fear of tomorrow. It always wants a guarantee, a pre-planned map, a safe routine that protects its fragile security. But life cannot be mapped, life cannot be guaranteed by any human philosophy. Life is an uncharted sea, a fluid dance of energy that changes its patterns with every single breath. If you are hard like a rock, you will be constantly broken by the changing currents of existence. If you are soft like water, you will naturally adapt yourself to whatever terrain unfolds before you, flowing effortlessly into the infinite ocean. This soft, receptive passivity is the core of the feminine principle within the Tao. It does not mean you become weak or cowardly. It simply means you drop your aggressive, egoistic struggles and allow yourself to be carried by the majestic current of the whole. You become an empty flute, letting the divine musician sing its eternal song through your being, without any resistance, without any personal interference. Look at the ancient stories of the great Zen masters who lived their entire lives in this state of absolute let-go. They did not sit in their temples reciting empty formulas. They lived their meditation through the most ordinary acts of daily life. For a Zen master, walking down the mountain to collect water is as sacred as sitting in deep samadhi. Cooking a simple meal for his disciples is as full of divinity as writing a magnificent commentary on the scriptures. He does not divide life into the sacred and the mundane, because his awareness has transformed everything into a single seamless reality. He does not try to achieve anything. He does not try to become a saint. He simply enjoys his own unique being, completely content with whatever the present moment provides. If he is hungry, he eats. If he is tired, he sleeps. If the spring comes, he watches the grass grow by itself. This is the supreme simplicity of the awakened soul, an ordinary state of existence that is extraordinarily beautiful because it carries no trace of the ego. But you have been conditioned for centuries by your teachers and priests to believe that your ordinary life is not enough, that you must always achieve something special, that you must climb the ladder of power, wealth, and spiritual prestige to leave your name in the pages of history. This constant ambition is the ultimate poison of human consciousness. It creates a deep schizophrenia inside your heart, turning your life into a continuous frantic race toward a future that never arrives. You are like a man who is walking on a treadmill, moving his legs with immense speed, sweating and exhausting himself completely, but staying in the exact same spot. You miss the only reality that is available to you, the here now. This very moment, this precious breath you take, is the only place where life happens. The past is nothing but a memory, a collection of dead footprints in the dust. The future is nothing but imagination, a dream that has not yet been born. Only the present is real, only the now is true, and the moment you step out of it, you become a dead zombie wandering through a mirage. If you want to discover the ultimate truth of your existence, you do not need to look for it in books or temples. You must look into your own interiority, into the silent space of your own no-mind. When you observe your thoughts with absolute, unclouded awareness, without judging them, without calling them good or bad, you make a magnificent discovery. You find that the mind is not a solid entity at all. It is just a process, a continuous stream of passing thoughts, memories, and imaginations. It is exactly like a crowd standing on the street. If all the people leave, the crowd disappears completely, because the crowd had no independent existence of its own. When you watch your thoughts silently, without clinging to them, they begin to dissolve one by one. And when all thoughts vanish, you look inside and you realize that in your mind is not. Only an infinite, radiant emptiness remains, a pure space of consciousness that has no boundaries, no limitations, and no death. This emptiness is your original face, the face you had before the world was ever born. And when your inner vision becomes perfectly clear, you look at the outside world, you look at the magnificent forms, the shapes, the colors, and the matter, and you realize that in form is not. What appears to be a solid reality is nothing but a fluid dance of cosmic energy moving at an incredible speed. The form is only a temporary manifestation, a passing wave on the surface of the infinite deep. Both the inner mind and the outer matter are made of the exact same stuff, the stuff that dreams are made of. It is all a beautiful moving reflection of the one, nameless, formless Tao. When this realization dawns upon your heart, all your anxieties vanish in a single second. All your desires lose their grip on your soul, and the three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and aversion are completely dissolved and eliminated from your life. You become whole. You become integrated. You become a beautiful synthesis of the earth and the sky. You become Zorba the Buddha, living your life with absolute passion, absolute celebration, while remaining deeply anchored in the infinite silence of the eternal. To remain deeply connected to this fluid flow of consciousness, to deepen your practice and align your daily life with these profound mystical secrets. You can access our comprehensive guide, the Hidden Energy Protocol, Reclaim Your God Mode, which is available right now through the link in the description below.